we need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is Buffalo What's Next. I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Dave Debo.
And I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
After May 14th, how can we afford not to talk about race?
About education, about segregation, about humanity.
Since the dawn of this nation, racial violence has existed.
The way we have designed our society has a big hand in what occurred in that Tops Market.
The suburban area, everywhere. We must work and teach our children.
We need to make sure that we put more funding in our programs that help prevent gun violence and more money into art.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truths.
This is Dave Debo, and for the balance of the program today, we're talking with Glenaida Garlock. I've got a resume in front of me, folks, and I figured we'd talk about a lot of your activism, but with particular regard to the legal community. She's a law student at UB. She's been involved in many of their clinics, and involved in a lot of different activism projects, and I think from that view, we can look at some of the problems and some of the hope and some of the things that need to happen in Buffalo. Glenaida, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for this discussion.
I have to say, I had a past guest on the program who recommended you and said she's outspoken and she's good. That was recommendation enough. But then I got your email, and the signature on your email really struck me, because you are Vice President, Latin American Law Students Association. That's at the bottom of the email. Co-President, Native Indigenous Law Students Association, and on the DEI Council for the Black Law Students Association, Outlaw. I'm not about to say someone can't be French and German and Italian all at the same time. Certainly there are people that are Latin American and Indigenous and Black all at the same time. But I don't think there are a lot of people who are activists in each of those arenas all at the same time. But you are.
Yeah, I value all the parts of myself. I'm also president of Parents and Law Students, too, because parent is a huge part of my identity, too. And I just couldn't advocate for one without advocating for all of the parts of me. So,
Are the issues the same across the board? Is there a unifying theme?
There's a unifying theme, I think, of just alienation and just people using your identity against you instead of using it as something to celebrate.
Give me an example. What do you mean?
So being a parent is an easy thing. A lot of people will view being a parent, and I was a single mom for years, as being a big burden. But I think, especially in the legal career, for me, it's just empowered me so much. I'm able to connect with more people, to understand what they're going through. I have a knowledge that people who didn't raise a child or were a single mom wouldn't have. And so I view it as a superpower, and other people might view it as an inconvenience.
Because we all bring our different backgrounds to the table.
Exactly.
What someone might think in one case is a detriment is you use the word superpower.
Yeah, exactly.
How has being a mom informed your work?
So I had my son at 16. I was senior year. I was pregnant all junior year. I had him to start a senior year. It's funny because I remember it being so easy, and I don't know how I did it. But it was a lot because I was in school working 3 part-time jobs. I was in subsidized housing. My life was just honestly crazy. But I know what it's like now to struggle. I know what it's like to have to balance 155 things and then still have to put significant time into raising a whole other person. And so now that I'm in a privileged position of about to become a lawyer and being a student attorney, I'm able to really see what people are struggling with, and that the small matter in front of me is really just a small part of all the chaos in their life, and I'm able to appreciate that on a different level. So it really helps me.
You come with an automatic empathy.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly what happens.
Let's look at one of those struggles, and I know this is an issue that is dear to you, the idea of housing.
Yes.
Once you become an attorney, and some of your work already has dealt with the idea of housing, what is the housing problem in Buffalo, and how do we fix it? Big question, I know, but let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a few big issues. I mean, right now we're having an affordable housing crisis, and there's two big prongs to that. You know, there's the public housing aspect, and then there's even becoming a homeowner. Like the inflation rates on houses right now is insane, and the requirements to buy a house. I'm currently trying to buy a house, and I have a pretty secure future, and it's even impossible for me to get approved for a mortgage right now, even with my sound financial standing right now. And then we have an issue of affordable housing. Just all of the public housing is waitlisted. A lot of times the public housing can be in not the safest areas. You know, we don't have any. We have a couple public housing units in the suburbs, but we need significantly more. Just because you have to live in public housing doesn't mean that you should have to live in dangerous parts of Buffalo. You should be able to live in Amherst and in the good parts of Cheektowaga and Clarence and stuff like that. And a huge problem then, it trickles down to the schools because I don't have the exact number on me today, but in my undergraduate studies, I remember learning the number of teenage girls who don't have stable housing. And it was over like 15, 20%, I remember. It was something so shocking. And I just remember thinking, like, if you don't even have a stable place to live, how are you going to go to high school and focus on this, on your grades and stuff?
Yeah, if the housing is substandard, if you're kept up at night by, I don't know, rats crawling through the walls.
Exactly.
Then basic math and history don't matter quite as much.
Not at all. Not at all. And then you have the issue of if these kids are struggling at home with housing insecurity, food insecurity, and then they're going to school to be disciplined for however they're acting in school. And that could affect their whole record, them even being able to be allowed in school or going to college. And it all honestly stems from not having a stable life at home.
Let's look at some of the solutions, though. You talked about the idea of more public housing, not necessarily in the city of Buffalo.
Yeah.
I can remember several years back when then Erie County Executive Joel Giambra started talking about regionalism.
Yeah.
And maybe having the school district from Clarence, rich Clarence, end up being somehow more involved with Buffalo, or going to some sort of unigov where the city of Buffalo is kind of absorbed into the entire county. And while people in the city liked that idea, the folks in, hypothetically speaking here, Amherst, Cheektowaga, weren't exactly keen on that. There might have been a little racism going on there. How would you plunk down a housing unit in, say, Amherst or Cheektowaga without having to deal with the big R?
So this is actually a great question for me because I grew up in Akron, New York.
Oh, my.
So there's only a couple people that look like me out in Akron. So I've dealt with all of it. Surprisingly, the people who oppose things are actually a smaller number than you would imagine. There's a lot more people who support and even would actively want. It's just a lot of times those people are non-confrontational people, so they're not the ones speaking out against it. So I think it comes with two things. One, empathy in sharing knowledge. So actively teaching people like why this is important and like showing positive examples of it happening without the chaos. And another thing is timing. You know, whenever you change something really rapidly, there's going to be a huge pushback. So maybe before it happens for like a year, we talk about it happening and we have public town halls where people can voice their concerns. And then you're able to mitigate those concerns by showing them the facts of the situation that maybe their concerns aren't really accurate. So I think it just comes with care and being empathetic to even the people who are a little racist, because even though their views are wrong, they have them for a reason. And instead of just fighting and trying to understand, I think you can solve a lot more problems with honey than vinegar. Oh, now that's interesting. We've talked in this program a lot about race relations. Yeah. And I think you might be the first, if not certainly one of a few, to say we don't have to like the racism, but we at least need to, am I putting words in your mouth here, understand it? I do. I'm not a racist empath, but I just grew up with it. And what I learned is that people aren't racist because of your skin tone. They're racist because of some perception of what they think your skin tone means. Fear. Yeah. And I've obviously shown a lot of people that I'm adverse to what their opinions of me are at the first glance. And I know a lot of people who do struggle with racism trying to find exceptions for me. And when they do that, it's very easy for me to challenge their ideological as a whole. I'm nothing unique, but I'm not the way I am because I'm Black, and I'm not. There's so much more to me than just being Black. And when I'm able to challenge that one situation, then they're able to use it to all their other situations. They're able to question their views. Like, am I judging this person before really knowing them? And I've seen a lot of people actually change. And I know that's a weird thing, but I actually have. And that's why I'm not ashamed of being from Akron, because I think it makes me a better person to be able to bridge the gaps between our really racist rural area, our kind of racist suburb area, and then our diverse city.
And you also said, let's say we were going to plunk down a public housing unit in Akron. You sketched out a very legalistic, this is why you're a law student, a solution there. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out what the problems are. Let's mitigate the problems. That is a structure that almost springs out of the SEEKR, Environmental Quality Review Act stuff. Let's figure out what the problem is. Let's mitigate the problem. Let's not automatically say no because zoning allows this to happen, but let's figure out how to make it happen in ways that can mitigate the likely problems.
Yeah, and that approach should be for everything. Being in my situation of activism, there are so many problems that I've been able to solve just by caring and being willing to actually think it through and put the work in. Because honestly, a lot of our problems aren't just problems that don't have solutions. It's just there's not enough people who are willing to do the solutions.
Let's talk a little bit about your activism. What would be your number one cause?
Everything is equity. Everything is access. I got to where I am not because, well, I did have a little access growing up in Akron. You know, it's a little privilege of a place. But a lot of the things that I did because I reached for them and I grabbed them. And if I didn't have the means to get there, I found the means to get there. But it shouldn't have been as hard as it was for me. And everything I do to make somebody who was in my position be able to be where I am now without working as hard. Just to have the information, to know their rights, to know how they can get out of the positions that they're in. Like all the assistance that we have, like public housing, food stamps, all of that stuff, it shouldn't be meant to keep people in these situations of poverty. It should be meant to empower them.
And you do work with BLRR, Black Love Resists and the Rust.
Yes, I love Blur. I'm not as active as I would like because law school takes a lot of my time. But all of the people at Blur have just inspired me. They're professionals in the activism field. You know, I really learned Blur has a level of empathy that even I don't possess. And so I really am learning how to be a more worldly, empathetic person because growing up in Akron, I wasn't around too many diverse people. And so even now, it's hard for me. I have to learn my own biases and I have to learn how to really be more open. And I think that's why I'm a little bit more, empathetic towards the people stuck in their ways because I know what it's like to not know, and then I know what it's like to learn and change my own opinion.
Glenaida Garlock is here. She's a law student, a student attorney at the University of Buffalo Law School. You spoke of how you do a lot of this work through the UB Law School for credit. And I know that part of what you have done in that regard was a trip recently to Puerto Rico. Tell me about it.
So for me, it was fun, but it was also heartbreaking. My mother was born in Puerto Rico, and I actually got to see where she was born. I got to see where my son's father is from Puerto Rico. I got to see where my son's family's from. And it was amazing because it's the most beautiful place on earth. I got to swim in the sea with fishes. But it was heartbreaking.
Because they're still dealing with Hurricane Maria and the earthquakes. And Hurricane Fiona even more recently, there are issues there.
The hurricanes aren't the disaster. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Most of Puerto Rico's problems come from America and colonization.
Explain.
Puerto Rico they're suffering from a pandemic called disaster capitalism. So whenever a disaster happens, it's publicized that the disaster is the problem, like Fiona, and like we've heard all about these. That's all we hear about. What we don't hear about is the millions of dollars in FEMA funding that is just mismanaged and disappears, or all the tax breaks that are given to these big companies to provide help, but in the contracts there's no enforcement provisions. So they're spending all this money to help Puerto Rico, but it's never going to Puerto Rico because it was never intended to go to Puerto Rico. And there's no one checking these to make sure that it happens. And the result on Puerto Rico is that these people, the cities are getting gentrified. They're getting built up for tourist attractions. They're spending billions of dollars to exploit the culture and the natural resources. And then the people are getting displaced. But it's not like Buffalo where they can just move to Cheektowaga or Kenmore. They have nowhere else to go. And so being that Puerto Rico is half of who I am and Buffalo is half of who I am, I really hope that I can find solutions to both problems and use my expertise in both areas to really make both places more equitable.
Talk more about what that looks like down there, though. What do you do?
So that's a hard thing down there because it's not like Buffalo to where everything is systemic and where you have these specific means to go buy things. In Buffalo, you can see how many cats versus people there are. You can search that statistic and have it, and it's accurate. In Puerto Rico, there's no centralized data. So there's no way for you to learn and then present because there's no way to get the information except for talking to.
And while, yes, they are part of the United States, I imagine there's not as many legal protections or structures that you can use to your advantage. If someone is being mistreated here in Buffalo, you can say, hey, that's against the law. Hey, I'm going to litigate, or at least we have reason to discuss this here.
And there are definitely legal protections. Their court system is pretty advanced, just like ours. However, the issue is their police system is nowhere near. They are so understaffed. It's hard to get to a lot of places in the island. There's not ever power on the island, so cell service isn't always reliable. So yeah, it can be really hard to enforce these things, especially when the people committing the crimes are white-collared billionaires. There's no way to attack it all. And I mean, there's also corruption too, so it's maybe not even safe to attack all the issues that you see there.
You said something about parallels to Buffalo, and I want to get to that after the break. But one other area I did need to touch on, you've also been active in the idea of gender discrimination, but particularly LGBTQ plus elders.
Elders. Yeah. There was a lot of baby boomers who were in the alphabet mafia, and now they are headed to nursing homes, and there's no protections for them. There's no, we have gender neutral bathrooms now. The millennial and Gen Z age, we have so many things to accommodate our alphabet mafia, which I'm also a part of. But for the elderly, there's nothing protecting them. And in fact, we've actually seen nursing homes turning away transgender individuals, saying that they don't have the medical equipment their equipment isn't fit to accommodate such
locally
things.
Here in Western New York.
Here in Western New York, all over America. This is a huge national epidemic that we're seeing, and there's absolutely no case law on it.
Glenaida Garlock is with us. We're going to take a short break, be back with her in just a second. She's involved in all sorts of activism, including some of the UB law clinics. She's a student attorney there. Much more to come. This is Buffalo What's Next on WBFO.
Do you absolutely love Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, PBS NewsHour, great performances, and other amazing shows on WNED PBS, but you're not always in front of your TV when they're on? Don't miss them. You can stream the channel live wherever you are in Western New York by visiting WNED.org/live or use the WNED PBS app.
WNED Classical has been conducting interviews of their own on YouTube with the classical music community. Have you ever wondered what goes into the performances you hear on WNED Classical? Head on over to our Buffalo Toronto Public Media YouTube page to see the collection of interviews that we've orchestrated. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And this is Dave Debo. We're here with Glenaida Garlock. She's a student attorney in all the various law clinics at UB. She's also heavily involved in activism across the board. A lot of issues you probably heard us get into before the break. And before the break, you said that there is, especially if you're looking at something like Puerto Rico and the work you've done there, that there are some parallels here to Buffalo. Explain. Tell me more.
Yeah, so a huge problem in Puerto Rico is segregation, which obviously we struggle with here in Buffalo. And it all dates back to history, just how Buffalo does. So a lot of people think Christopher Columbus came to America, but he actually went to like Haiti and Puerto Rico. And so then when he brought back, the Taino people, the Indigenous people, were killed from 50,000 to 1,200, he went to Nigeria, and that's where they captured the Yoruba tribe and brought them to Puerto Rico. So in Puerto Rico, you see a lot of people, actually like 75% of the island claims that they're white. They claim that Spanish side of them. And then there's a small population of people who just claim their indigenous side. Often they live in the middle of the island. And then on the coastal region, you see a lot of the African descent people. Some have come recently from other places in the Caribbean, or and they've moved there, but a lot of them have just been there generationally, and so you see a very segregated island, and obviously we know what segregation comes in unequal resources, and so I mean that's a huge problem in Buffalo too, of how do you serve certain populations, and then there's also a huge thing of gender violence on the island, which we really struggle with here in Buffalo. It was weird. It kind of felt like home when I was speaking with the different universities on the current issues that were on the island.
Buffalo is balkanized.
Yes.
into neighborhoods that are based on race.
Yeah, exactly.
Help me with the number, 73% of the African Americans in Buffalo live east of Main Street.
I don't know the exact number, but it's something like that.
It's close to that number, if that's not it.
What's even crazier about Buffalo, though, is the rings. So in Buffalo's the first ring. The second ring is kind of more Cheektowaga area, like that. Yeah. And so the first ring is 70% even, or 80, 90% diverse. You get to the next ring, it drops down to 20, 30% diverse. Then you get to the outside ring, which is Transit Road, Lewiston, and the number drops down to 5% diversity. And I'm how is that crazy of a drop?
I grew up in Alma, and I'm significantly older than you, but in my high school, the joke was, we're diverse, we have a Jewish family.
Yeah.
That was it.
Exactly.
It was an all-white district.
Yeah. No, that's exactly how it is. Akron's still the same way. It's so crazy. That's why we need affordable housing out there. We need to start getting people in units out there. And it's interesting because the suburbs and the rural areas do actually have a lot of affordable housing, but they're only elderly and disabled housing. Yeah, Akron alone has 3 public housing units, but they're only available to elderly or disabled.
Is that because of policy or just the way it's developed?
So the units themselves are the elderly or disabled units. But I think it goes into systemic, we want to help our people here. So we have our population that's aging, that's on Social Security. We want to help that population, but we don't care about the younger generation that needs that, which are obviously mostly more concentrated in the city. So yeah, it's bizarre.
Talk to me in the remaining little bit we have here about how to affect change. Earlier you addressed it in the context of race relations, but more generally, what can we do perhaps on the east side of Buffalo to get rid of the segregation or to get rid of the substandard housing? Or to get rid of the poverty or the bad education rate, graduation rates, that sort of thing?
So the biggest thing I learned in law school, the number one theme is closer to the problem, closer to the solution. And I also had to learn, which was a really hard thing for me.
Does that mean, let me probe it a little further, does that mean that the solutions have to come from the community? Because that lets other people off the hook, doesn't it?
It does. So it's not necessarily a this for that. So accountability is still important, but it just means that people like me aren't the solutions. People like me have the access to the solutions and have the resources needed for the solutions. But the more educated I am, the more money I make from my career that I'm going to have, the farther away I am from the problem. And that's why it's important for me to empower the people who are closest to the solution. Everything I do with my activism is just trying to empower others to have the resources to be able to know how to speak to our legislation, to know how to write laws. Because, writing laws is easy. People think it's so hard. It's not. You just have to know how to do it. And that's something that anyone can teach you. And how to I do, like, the work that I do with the sheriff's office. That was so easy. We literally just asked the sheriff's office if we could come in and have a conversation with us. And they're like, yeah,
okay.
Of course.
Wow.
So,
because you're right. I think that's against the stereotype that, we don't want any new ideas.
No, they just don't have resources. Okay. No one has resources. So if we are all able to do our part, and it doesn't even have to be a big part. I do way more than I should have to do. But if we all just did a little part and we all had a small commitment to making Buffalo better tomorrow than it was today, I think the things that we could change would be exponential. It just starts with having basic empathy, basic care for our neighbors, and we can really do a big change. We've seen the East Side. We had the Tops massacre, which was horrible for our community, but the Juneteenth that followed was insane. I have never seen so many people in one area smiling, laughing, having fun. Like, if anywhere can solve the problems that we have in our community, I know Buffalo can. And so I just want to help people be inspired to do that.
And this question might be an obvious one, but I think it's a nice way to sort of end the program. Are you an optimist?
Actually, no.
Wow. Well, with all of the activism, with all of the potential for change, you still do this, and you're a pessimist? Explain.
I don't know if I'm a pessimist.
But you're not an optimist. Okay.
I just think that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But I just think that that's okay.
The mitigation factor again.
And it's so funny. My professor, Heather Abraham, she always is like, you charge into everything so enthusiastically. And I'm like, yes, I do. But if it doesn't work out, I'll just be like, okay. And then I'll charge the next thing enthusiastically. Because if it does work out, then it looks like I always planned for that from the beginning. But in my life, everything that could go wrong has always gone wrong. And so I've just had to figure out how to get to the next step. I've never let it stop me. If a door closes, I'll find one that's open. If there's a roadblock, I'll climb over it. If I can't, I'll bust through it, or I'll find a different path that doesn't have a roadblock. So I'm a realist. I think that there's good and bad in every person. There's good and bad in every situation. I think if more people, like, a huge problem we have is that when someone makes a mistake, we, like, disqualify them from everything. We're like, oh, you're done, blah, blah, blah. But instead, I think we should have more of an attitude where if someone makes a mistake, they probably know what they did wrong, and we could all use it to not make that mistake again. I think we need to get more comfortable with making a mistake. So I'm not an optimist because I don't think that everything's butterflies and rainbows, but I think we can still find joy when it's not.
Perfect. Thanks so much for the discussion. This has been great fun.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Glenaida Garlock is a student attorney at the University of Buffalo's Law School. This is Dave Debo. It's Buffalo What's Next on WBFO. More to come. Stay with us.
Buffalo is home to many historical treasures, including architectural gems.
Central Terminal affected everybody. Everybody from the common man to the movie star walked this concourse.
Beloved community establishments.
They might get a glimpse to see Lena Horne. They might see Dizzy or Miles Davis, Charlie Parker.
And homes for local sports teams.
When we talk about an institution, Memorial Auditorium was an institution.
The WNED PBS original production, Remembering Western New York, explores some of these iconic structures and their connection to people who live in the region.
There was a time when Buffalo's Main Street was the focus of holiday shopping in Western New York.
Watch Remembering Western New York now on YouTube.
This is Buffalo What's Next, where we have conversations with the community about moving forward. To have your voice heard, press the Talk to Us button on the WBFO app, and we'll work to get your questions and comments on the air. Join us on Twitter at WBFO or email us at news@wbfo.org. Together, we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And welcome back to Buffalo What's Next. Our guest in this segment of the show, Raziya Hill. Raziya is not only the founder and executive director, but also the employee for Every Bottom Covered.
Yes, I am.
Thanks for joining us, Raziya.
Thank you for having me.
Most certainly a pleasure for sure. And let's get right into what Every Bottom Covered is. A nice, clever name, of course, for a service, not a service, but an effort to make sure that children, small children, have their bottoms covered with diapers.
Yes, we are the diaper bank. So similar to a food bank, we provide a supplemental supply of diapers to low-income families in underserved communities, just to address the importance of diaper need and how it affects the whole community.
I see on your T-shirt, ask me about 1 in 3.
Yes.
What is 1 in 3?
1 in 3 families experience diaper need on a national level. In Buffalo, we have a 40% poverty rate. So, again, you can know that that's actually closer to half of our community living in poverty. And so that is what our work addresses, is that 1 in 3, and making sure that families have that adequate supply. And that also we educate government on inclusion of diaper demonstration programs such as ourselves in the funding that's going around, because diapers are not purchasable by SNAP or WIC.
And let's go back to the roots of Every Bottom Covered and how it started for you.
Yes.
Tell me about your story.
I am a single mother, and when my son was in his infancy, I struggled with the ability to keep an adequate amount of supply of diapers, even considering myself the working poor and being able to still go to work and work a 40-hour work week and still come up short and have to make that decision of either food and, adequate clothing based on season or what have you, or transportation, other issues that I had going on. I had to kind of make those decisions on what would skimp in our household. So leaving the diaper on too long, my friends and family members having the same issue and having diaper rash in their homes. So it's a labor of love for me, because when I was in a position to be able to start a 501c3 and start a nonprofit organization, I did so out my paycheck. I purchased diapers for the first year or so that I operated Every Bottom Covered, and I started in my living room and delivered from my vehicle. So it's very much so a personal journey for me. I know that the feelings that I had around not being able to adequately supply that for my child are things that I would never want another family to worry about. So I do the work from a place of not only necessity, because after 13 years of raising a child in a low-income household, there was still nowhere that families could get diapers. So addressing a need that had been long unmet, and then that is affecting so many other parts of our community. Children can't go to daycare. Families can't go to work, missing up to 4 days of work. We have children going to the emergency room for something that's preventable. They get diaper rash and urinary tract infections and yeast infections. So we have clinics that are treating things that don't have to exist if children are properly diapered.
I want to step back to something that you said, and and if you can, because been a lot of time since then, but you mentioned the feelings that you had at that time.
Yes.
If you can, as best you can, share what that felt like. I mean, I'm a parent. I know those difficult decisions you have to make, but this is a decision I never had to make.
You feel hopeless. There is a feeling of hopelessness and not being able to provide such a basic need. Children can't go without diapers. I mean, it's not something that you can put off purchasing until you have more money. Children need to stay dry and clean. I mean, a child with a wet diaper cries a lot more. Right. They're uncomfortable, and therefore you're uncomfortable, even if it's in a mental space. The depression and anxiety of not being able to meet all my needs and to have someone else depending on me and not be able to meet their needs. I mean, it does not end when a child ages out of diapers. So the mental health aspect of it, of a family holding on, as a mother, just the worry of not being able to have, still to this day, lack is still a concern of mine, even 19 years later.
How did you cope then, though? You were obviously very young.
I was 23 when I became a mom, and I was a single mother from concept. I knew that his father was not going to be present. I I really just, I did the best I could. I don't know that I fully coped. Again, not having access at the time to good mental health, not having a therapist to talk to, going down and testing these resources out myself, having to get on food stamps, having to get temporary cash assistance, and the very, very nasty way that people are treated in those buildings, and the way that they're looked down upon. Nobody knew that I had a private school education or I'd gone through Buffalo Prep, or, I wasn't, my education or my IQ meant nothing. I was just number 12 at the window, and you feel like you're number 12 at the window. The building is dirty, the resources are lacking, it's never quite enough, and then you also have to be demeaned in some way when you're going down there to get it, and threatened by the sheriff that's standing there ready to arrest you if you are too frustrated. So it's a feeling I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, and certainly putting myself in that position allows me to make sure that families never have to worry about the diapers not being present.
It's interesting because it's a simple solution that you've come up with it, but there's nothing simple about putting together, or I see that you've done over 1 million diapers for people already.
Yes.
There's nothing simple about that.
It has not been simple, no, but it is a simple gesture. So the idea, again, we give families food, but we presume they have somewhere to cook it. We presume they have gas, a stove, refrigeration options. Again, with diapers, we give a baby a diaper, but we presume that a mother's not in a homeless shelter putting that on, or that she has feminine hygiene products. It's a small gesture, but I believe that it starts conversations that will create a healthier Buffalo and a healthier community, a healthier Western New York in general, which is my ultimate goal. And so you kind of work through it. It is not easy. Starting a nonprofit of any kind is not easy, especially if you're looking for it to be impactful and quote-unquote a success. But there's always going to be children to diaper. There's always going to be communities that need this resource. So I don't consider myself even remotely starting on the process yet. We're still very much so in the infancy.
Understood. Raziya Hill is our guest this morning of Every Bottom Covered here in Buffalo. Interesting, although you came out of Buffalo, you're a Buffalo person, but you've expanded this already throughout Western New York.
Yes, we are in Allegheny County. We have 4 partners in Allegheny County, and we also are in Chautauqua County, and we're moving into Niagara County as well. So diaper need is pretty much everywhere that babies are, and anywhere that there's a low-income subset in the community. So anywhere that you have jobs that are low-paying jobs, there's some babies in need in your community. So we have found the zip codes in the areas that are the most distressed, and those are the areas that we focus our initial work on, and trying to take down the transportation barrier that exists because families don't have the capability to travel from Allegheny County to Buffalo. There is no public transportation in Allegheny County. There's a digital divide there, even more so than what we experience here in Buffalo.
It is interesting that you bring up Allegheny County because, again, going back to how maybe you felt going to get services, back when you were a young mother, and how you were made to feel, there's also that perception that, well, this is just a Buffalo problem, an East Side Buffalo problem.
Right.
Allegheny County couldn't be more different than the east side of Buffalo in terms of racial makeup and things along those lines, but yet there's still a poverty issue.
Extreme poverty issue. There are not a lot of resources out there. There are not a lot of companies or, work opportunities there, education opportunities there. The nearest hospital could be 45 minutes to an hour. There is no transportation setup. Like, there might be some van services or some small bus services, but they don't even have the capacity to travel from one side to the other of Allegheny County, or Wellsville to Cuba, And I've learned a lot about what rural poverty looks like. It may, like you said, have a different racial makeup, but still poverty nonetheless. It still requires the same resources, if not more, again, because you're in a farming and an agricultural space, and we've seen how the farming industry has taken a hit. And there's not a lot of assimilation into urban living or into city life, if you will. So I don't even know that they know exactly where the resources start at. And, a service like this, they they're very appreciative of it because then it gets families into the door for the other services that are available there.
So I'm just kind of curious about, as you were doing that outreach, did you run into any blocks, anything that changed you? It was a little difficult to work your way through? I guess I always think that anything you're doing here probably has been difficult to work through.
Oh, for sure.
But what about that?
I've not seen a lot of opposition anywhere that the program has been placed. Sometimes people want more,
Sure.
Just 50 diapers, but that's the identified gap, so that's why we focus on 50 diapers. But as far as like culturally, no, I really haven't had that concern. I think initially when I was starting, I presented to pretty much all of Allegheny County, the people who were the movers and shakers. And I remember one gentleman saying, well, you don't know what we need here. Why don't you just tell us how you do it and basically stay where you are? But thankfully, there was another woman on the call who was like, I know right now of 4 or 5 organizations that would be perfect to model this. And so that energy outweighed the gentleman who said, just tell us how to do it because you don't know what we need. And I mean, I'm sure the people that he's helping with the work that he does, they're benefiting from our presence there. So he might be a different conversation now.
Yeah, we'd like to revisit that.
Yeah,
for sure.
I would too.
I bet you would. But you carried on. I give you credit for that.
Absolutely. Babies need diapers. Families need supports. And this is not for me. My son is 19 years old, but this is for a healthier Western New York. So I will go wherever there are babies in distress. And that's it. I'm not deterred based on the color of my skin or the color of anyone else's. This is not an issue that knows color. We deal with a lot of new Americans, a lot of refugee population, a lot of cultural barriers, but the reality is the one common thread is that they have children who have a need, and this is a need that I can meet. So just like we would not let a family starve based on our differences, I won't let a baby be wet if I can help.
Let's we've identified the need. I want to kind of come back to that a little bit here, but let's go now to the other part of this, which identifying need is one thing. Now getting the resources.
Yes.
1 million diapers, over 1 million diapers.
Yes.
How did you do this?
So we are very much a community organization, very much a grassroots organization. So a lot of it was just the community stepping up. Diaper drives, organizations like the Care Connection, they initially stepped up and did 2 Amazing Mother Day, and we got like 70,000 diapers both years. And then from there, businesses get together, departments might compete with one another, a jeans day and some money coming from that. We have identified the need, been very direct and clear in the fact that that's where we will address the need, and organizations have have stepped up and worked alongside us. But in addition to that, we're part of the National Diaper Bank Network, and we're part of Baby to Baby, and so using those 2 national platforms allow us to get access to larger amounts of resources, and then we just turn those resources right back out into the community. So 1 diaper at a time. That's over going on 8 years that we've distributed that amount. Again, 400,000 just in Allegheny County in about not even 2 years. That just shows you that people want the resource. And so we're just trying to keep meeting it, keep meeting the need, and keep fundraising, keep raising awareness, keep taking opportunities like this to kind of speak to what diaper need looks like, and putting the word out there and talking about the public health issue that is diaper need. So that's the plan, and that's how we have. It's 1 million. I want to be clear. It's 1 million diapers and pull-ups because we also do pull-ups.
Sure.
So it's a combination of things and a combination of ways that we've received them. But yes.
Yeah, we're going to give you a break on the pull-ups caveat
just in case anyone's fact-checking, there's also pull-ups.
Well, that's very good. It sounds, though, like if people started fact-checking about the reality of this, though,
yes,
they would be surprised, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. And it is all public knowledge. Organizations like National Diaper Bank Network do studies. They, put the work out there. We lobby in D.C. We lobby for federal programming. We lobby on stateside to have diapers included. And I think that the easy thing is throw it on TANF, which is temporary cash assistance, or add it to SNAP, but those are not checked alongside the cost of living. So as inflation goes up, those benefits don't go up. So to cut that line and to add us an addition or as a semicolon, it will actually take away from the programs that are already underfunded. So we are looking to create a line item, and to take some of the money and some of the resources that we spend on so many other things in this nation and put that on babies, because it starts in the womb. And if we don't have healthy babies, we won't have a healthy future. They're going to grow up eventually, and they're going to have all those things that we've talked about, the health issues, the mental health issues, the lack of productivity in our communities. All of those things will affect us all. So
I think I know the answer to this, but you might even have a specific answer. The price of diapers has gone up here in the last 2 years?
It has. I mean, diapers in general are between $80 to $100 per child in a household. So if you have 2 or 3 children of diapering age, or you have multiples, that is a bill that, it can take up to 14 to 17% of the income of a family in general. So now if your income's already low, imagine 14% or 17% of your income being taxed with a basic need. And again, we put food insecurity at such a high level, but we don't put diapering or basic need insecurity on that same level, because a family has access and resources to programs like SNAP, which means they have access to food. And food banks are much more common than diaper banks. But there's about 300 of us doing the work nationally. We're in Alaska, we're in Hawaii, we're in Puerto Rico, but they'll let you know that we're everywhere that babies are. I don't even know if the work's being done in Canada or being done overseas, but it's such a new concept, like 20 years, but,
sure.
By way of, again, what we've come to know. We know about giving blood or giving plasma, but again, we don't know that this is a basic need, that without it, a child is going to go to the emergency room more, a parent's going to miss that opportunity to go to school or work. They're going to miss that opportunity to socialize in daycares. It's going to put them behind to be able to go to early childhood education programs. There's so many ramifications.
I'm wondering, as someone now who, you lived through this as a single mom.
Yes.
And now you're helping other families with this type of need. If you've developed an overall view about how society needs to address the realities of what people do not have.
Yes.
Have you developed like a larger vision about that? I mean, I know it's tough when you're, like you said, you're trying to do it at one bottom at a time here, but what about that?
I think that it is important to note that poverty does not have a specific look. People in poverty, you won't necessarily always be able to point them out and go, that person is really down in their luck. Working poor is a real statement, and people think that living check to check, we call it that, but that is a level of poverty. So again, how I personally frame it all is that it slows down the ecosystem. Like, it slows down our lives to not have resources being addressed. People are already starting at such a disadvantage, and that is not always based on color. That is based on class. And I think that if we don't define what poverty looks like, or at least attempt to define what poverty looks like, we'll constantly remain in it because we're going to not fully address it. For example, we don't raise the cost of living. We don't think about that when we are passing these laws or we're continuing on with SNAP. And in fact, we cut resources like that. And we punish poverty. People are being cut off because they might do a little bit better, but not so well because it falls outside of the guidelines. We don't think about things like that. For example, in my personal life, my mother is retired. She gets SSI, and she gets such a small amount of food stamps because she's a homeowner. So should she sell the home in order to get more food stamps? Again, it's just that type of thought process that we don't consider. Why would we stifle her and take away the home ownership that she's worked 50 years for in order to give her a few extra dollars to eat? We just really don't frame up what poverty looks like or what hardship looks like because we're too busy personally just infighting on nonsense. And if you keep it high level, then you don't think about the ground level, which is where most of the people are.
Do you see? Because I'm not surprised that you've thought a lot about this, and,
Yes.
and I appreciate your answer. And I'm just wondering, do you see any hope on that horizon? Is there enough conversation? Are there champions who can make a difference for this type of thing?
Yeah, I see hope. And I see the champions as the people who are down on the front lines doing the work, the people who are just like me, who are starting organizations, who are addressing needs that they are looking at directly, who are championing for offices of a local nature. I think all of that is part of doing the work. I think that it is imperative that more people find where they can get involved. And it's that power in numbers that will give us the results that we need, or at least push the envelope, start the conversation, even with like National Diaper Bank Network doing these white pages on poverty as it's based around diapers. That has allowed us to go out and have conversations as leaders individually, and then to personalize that to the communities we serve. Same thing with the work food banks do. Same thing with, the work that early childhood education programs do. It's all small pockets that by us addressing them and then also collaborating with one another, we can make a more impact. We can give more impact to it. So I do believe there's hope, and I hope to see it in my lifetime. But I think, again, we just need more people to champion good work.
We're coming down to our final couple of minutes here with Raziya Hill of Every Bottom Covered, and I want to make sure that before we go that we get into some key information about your organization. But yes. I can't let this opportunity pass because you were part of what was called the Snow Plow Mafia right after the Christmas blizzard. What was that?
I try to believe that everything I do is a labor of love, and that in fact was as well. Being a nonprofit leader, people presumed that we were just able to get right back out here and do work.
Right, they needed diapers during the blizzard. Yeah.
And I was in a blizzard too. We lost power for 2 days. We didn't know, it was very hopeless, a very hopeless feeling. And I was contacted by Kate Glazer and Lydia Dominic of Hope Rises and Buffalo Gives, and they were like, what can we do to help you? Because they have been great partners in general. So I was like, well, I'd love to get out and help people, but I'm snowed in my house. And they were like, what? The plows haven't run? And I was like, no. And in our community, the plows will run last here. So from
you live
that
over near the Delavan Grider
yes,
Community
on
Center.
the east side of Buffalo, historically, we have been plowed out last or very subpar. And so I didn't expect that this would be any different. And a storm of this magnitude was just unprecedented. So to that point, I don't know that they had a plan, because who was planning for the amount of what it turned into. Right. So from there, we just, in my bed, once the power came back on, just a couple text messages going around on how we could frame it and trying to get it started before the snow started to melt so that it wouldn't be heavier. And we, along with the Thurman Thomas Family Foundation and 26 Shirts, did the Snowplow Mafia, and people showed up. Over 100 people overnight showed up with shovels and snow blowers and plows, and we went around a 6-block radius of the Delavan Grider Community Center, and we plowed out, we helped plow out the community and shovel and dig out the community. And I'd like to think that we opened a conversation to get the involvement of the city. People were calling 311, trying to get their streets on the list. People wanted to know when the mafia was coming back out. But it was really just an immediate need to address it and to get, I live in a community just on my street of a bunch of senior citizens and homeowners, and they're in their houses by themselves. And I know personally of people who had heart attacks after it, of trying to dig themselves out. And it just seemed like a logical step to make sure that I could help in my community. So yes, Snowplow Mafia.
Yeah. Well, thanks to you and your partners on that one. That's we the city of good neighbors. Sometimes that cliche isn't always live up to it, does it? But in this particular case, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to make sure before we let you go. It sounds like, these diaper drives, maybe an office is listening right now. Yes. They might want to do something like that. What can they do? How can they make this happen?
So we always welcome diaper drives. I think that every bit helps. We definitely welcome volunteers. We have a warehouse. We have to repackage diapers, and we have to get them to our partner organizations. So we always welcome volunteers. People can always donate cash. That helps us to buy diapers or helps us to ship diapers. And just continuing to get the word out. So everybottomcovered.org. You can always visit the website, see what else we have going on. Come out and help. That's ultimately what it is. We're at the Delavan Grider Community Center, so if you know someone who needs help, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, noon to 4, that is where we distribute.
All right. That is outstanding, Raziya Hill. How's that young son of yours doing this all started off with?
He is doing wonderful.
Yeah?
He is thriving at Canisius College, and I'm so proud of him.
Absolutely. Well, Raziya Hill, thanks very much for joining us today on Buffalo What's Next.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Raziya Hill of Every Bottom Covered, and you heard it, everybottomcovered.org, right? Yeah. All right. Very good. That's easy enough to find out. Thanks very much for being with us, and thanks for everybody for listening to Buffalo What's Next today. This is WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown.